relationship, or moderate relationship, but it always looks on the relationship of two variables. Okay. Now in comparative is also part of quantitative research. However, you're going to compare two variables here. The factors that you will see in variable A should be seen also in variable B. So it's slightly different from the correlational, because in the correlational, you'll just look on the relationship, but in comparative, you're going to compare. Okay, in meta-analysis and systematic reviews, you will go back again, just like the grounded theory, you will go back again from the previous researches. And from the results of the researches, you will draw another conclusion. They call it the meta-analysis. You will collect a lot of researches here. Then you will analyze, or you will review the results of the researches, and that will become your own research. Okay. Now, on the second classification of the quantitative method, we have the experimental, and there are three types of this. We have what we call the pre-experimental, true experimental, and quasi-experimental. When we talk of pre-experimental, by the way, when we talk of experimental researches, it should have the composition of COMAR. COMAR, what is COMAR? There should be a control. MA is manipulation, and R is randomization. COMAR is control, manipulation, and randomization. Pre-experimental is like you will use the test. They call it pre-experimental because you will conduct pre-test first. And then there is a manipulation. You will use an instrument, or you will use something, something that will change the outcome of the previous one. And then you will get a post-test. They call it a pre-experimental because there is a pre-test, manipulation, and the post-test. Okay. Now in true experimental completes the COMAR. There should be control, there should be manipulation, and randomization. Okay, control, manipulation, and randomization. I will elaborate that later as we go on with our discussion. What's important here is you know what falls under quantitative, what falls under qualitative. Now, what's the difference between true experimental and quasi-experimental? True experimental have accomplished and met all the three requirements COMAR. In quasi-experimental, there is no randomization. So it's only COMA, control, and manipulation. There is no randomization. Again, when we use the pre-experimental, there should be a pre-test and the post-test. Pre-test, manipulation, and the post-test. In true experimental, it completed the COMAR, control, manipulation, randomization. In quasi-experimental, there is no randomization, but there is control and manipulation. Now let's move on to the third methodology of the research, the mix. The mixed type of research is just like what I said earlier. It's a combination of both the quality and the quantitative research. You can start it with the quantitative and then follow it up. After you finish the quantitative research, you have to follow it up with qualitative. Then you are using the mixed method. When same research that started with quantitative and followed up after with qualitative, we call that a triangulation. The research becomes stronger. Why? Because it is confirmed by two methodologies of research. Sometimes it has to be started with the qualitative first and vice versa. After the research has been done, it is confirmed by the results of quantitative. Okay, making it triangulated type of research. They call it the mixed method. Okay, again, qualitative cannot be expressed by numbers. These are more emotions, these are more beliefs, these are cultures, something that cannot be counted and accounted for. Quantitative, numbers will express the interpretation of the data that you will gather. Mixed method is a combination of both. They call it the triangulation. Let's move on to the next slide. Again, let's go back to Abdullah. Abdullah has a lot of questions. But wait, what's the difference between the two methods? And then he asks again, what types of data should I prepare? Okay, let us differentiate now the quantity and the quality. On the left of your screen, you will see here the qualitative. On the right of your screen, you will find there the quantitative. Okay, the first indicator, what are the types of data that we can get from the qualitative if it's not number? Data are more on words. You will interpret the word. You will interpret the pictures. Sometimes they use symbols. Sometimes it's the action itself. Sometimes it's color. Now, in qualitative research, the color, how do people interpret the type of colors? Sometimes they use gender. You will see this is more nominal gender. Nationality, they use the race. Group of people like Chinese, maybe Malaysian, European, Americans. It's more on expressed in qualitative nature. The tribe, which tribe? The sometimes in the Aussies, they call it aborigines. In the Philippines, we call it the Mangyan. So many more. However, in the quantitative research, it is expressed by the number. Basically, it's more on statistics. We call it quantitative research because of the nature of the statistics. You will use statistical treatment, and these are inferential statistics. You will focus more on the quantity, such as the length. What's the size? What's the weight? What's the score? So those are the data that you will be collecting in quantitative, which is very far different from the qualitative. How about the questions? What questions should be answered by the qualitative? Since it's not asking about numbers, usually it answers how and why. Sometimes they also ask about what. So you will find in the statement of the problem, if it is qualitative, how, because that will be expressed by the word. They will start by. Why is giving justifications and reasons, okay, in qualitative. On the other hand, in quantitative, you will answer here something that can be expressed by number, such as how much, how many, how often. More often, they will ask what. So look, the difference in the questions. How about the purposes and types of data analysis? Let's start with the qualitative research. The purpose is to explain in qualitative. You're going to interpret social interactions. You will interpret patterns. Sometimes you have to understand the nature. You are not going to make any hypothesis here because you cannot measure it. You will just start it with assumption first. You will assume. You will develop themes in qualitative themes. You will try to explore. Okay? However, in quantitative research, instead of assumption in qualitative, this one tests hypothesis. Sometimes it starts with null hypothesis. Sometimes it is directional hypothesis. Sometimes you call it the research hypothesis. But at the end of the research, you will still answer if the hypothesis you develop is accepted or rejected. Quantitative research intention is to predict for the future. Why? Because it has a pattern based from the number. Okay, it has a pattern based from the number. This will check the cause and effect. Okay, and there is always a treatment using statistical relationship. It's more conclusive. Now, what are the scopes of the results? The results is usually in qualitative, non-generalizable. It's particular. You cannot make conclusions. Why? Because it cannot be generalized. These are just based from the subjective information of some few selected small samples across the population. So the number of the sample do not matter here. As long as your data has been saturated by only very few people, it doesn't matter on the number because you are not basing it from the number. You will base it from the information that you gathered. Unlike in quantitative, it's more generalizable. Why? Because when you answer your hypothesis based on the number, you can now come to a conclusion. These conclusions can be drawn from the population. And the sample here is larger. The larger the sample, the more convincing and more acceptable it will be. Like in qualitative, the sample, it should always be more on credibility, the credibility of the participant. Okay, in quantitative, it's more on the number of the participant. Okay, now how do you analyze the data? Now the qualitative uses narrative. That's the reason why you have to be good in explaining. You will use good words because you will interpret the words, the action. There's a content analysis. It's more on thematic. You will develop themes. You will develop codes based on the data that you have gathered. There is a grounded theory. You will develop theory based on the themes that you have gathered. And then there's conversation analysis. On the other hand, quantitative research will use numerical, it's more on number. Linear regression, if you're going to look on the relationship. Logistic regression, we have the analysis of variance, more on. These are all inferential statistics. Statistical significance, you will test the significance. Is there a significant relationship between A and B? You will look on the correlation. Is there a significant relationship between A and B? And of course, you will be using some basic descriptive statistics like central tendency using the mean, median, mode. You will also use the statistical treatment they call the standard deviation, etc., percentile. Depends on what type of data you have gathered from the numbers. So basically the data analysis is significantly different from each other. One is more on narration, one is more on themes, conversion analysis. The other one is something to do with the use of inferential statistics. Now, how about the process? The process is more on inductive, from data to general assumption, from small group of people, and then you will be resulting into a general assumption. You will formulate them, just like what I had mentioned a while ago. You will examine entities. You will look on the emotions, on the actions, on the expressions, on the symbols, something that cannot be accounted for. On the other hand, in quantitative data, it's more on from big population. You will deduce from big population. You will end into conclusion. I therefore conclude, or will you accept the hypothesis or not based from you collected number. You will examine the variables here, the one that you have developed. And the variables, most of the time, are included in the title. Like in qualitative research, you will notice that it's very hard to make an assumption. First, there is the literature that you will be gathering here will be later after you have gathered the data. Unlike in quantitative research, you go to the literature first, look on what the researchers had offered you. And then from this, you will develop now your theory. But in qualitative research now, you will only get the literature after you have gathered the data. From the data, you will develop the theme, and from that then on, you will get now the literature and make the interpretation based on from your collected data. So they are far different from each other. Okay, here comes Abdullah again. Mumtaz, that's good to know. How about the design phase, Dr. Daniel? What are included in writing the design phase? Okay, this is what the textbook is telling us. Abdullah has so many questions, but basically the design phase is more on the 4 parts. First, the research design. What design are you going to use? The local. Local means the location. Okay, the location is more on the place. Population or sampling design. We include that also. That's also part of the design phase. Population is, of course, where you gather the data from. What design are you going to use? And what instrument are you going to use? That's the letter D. Let's start with research design. Research design will answer what type of design are you going to use, quantitative or qualitative method. Now, if it is quantitative, is it cross-sectional or RCT, randomized control trial, longitudinal, cohort, and case study? Yeah, Dr. Daniel, what's the difference between those 4? I will elaborate that later. Now, in quantitative, is it experimental, doctor, or not experimental? What am I going to use? If you want it to be on a controlled environment, it's experimental. If it's more on descriptive, you will use non-experimental. Okay, later we're going to look on which one is more preferable. What type of research, doctor? You have to consider some things before you will gather the data. Later on, we're gonna be looking on things to consider when you are doing the research design. Will you be using in research design? You will have an option such as will I be using descriptive, doctor? Will I be using correlational or exploratory? How about in qualitative method? When you move to qualitative method, will I be using phenomenological, doctor? Phenomenological is more on experience. You will notice here, these are experiences of people. Will I go back to the history, doctor? That's historical. That's more on qualitative. Should I go on the group of people, on their culture? Should I dig on their race? That's ethnographical. That's the design, ethnographical. Will I develop theory, doctor, after the research? You're using that kind of theory. Now, in quantitative or qualitative method, you should put in your heart what type of design are you going to use. So what's important here is you know when to use the quantitative, when to use the qualitative. Remember, quantitative should be expressed in number. It's more on using inferential statistics. Qualitative does not base it from the number. You will be using very minimal number here. Maybe nominal type only, yes, no, but it's more on descriptive statistics only. This one, inferential statistics. Now let's move on the research locale. By the way, just to elaborate the one that I was telling you a while ago, the difference between cross-sectional, cohort, and case study is control. When we talk of cross-sectional, it's more on what is present. You're looking on what is the present, the disease plus the exposure. Okay, you don't go on the you don't go back on the past in cross-sectional. Okay, now in cohort, meaning cohort, they live together. So at present there is an exposure. Maybe they are smoking. In the future, they will have lung cancer. Maybe they are eating much of the foods increased in sugar. In the future, you'll be looking on possible development of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Or maybe lack of exercise. In the future, they will develop obesity or, you know, obesity-related diseases. So when we look on the cohort study, we have here a data on what they have been exposed. and we will be looking on the possible effects of this exposure. Okay? How about in case control study, doctor? Now it's the opposite. When we say case control, it's the opposite of cohort. Why? Because this time it's not in the future, you're going back to the past. You have here the disease, maybe cases of renal failure, but you will dig on the past. What are the factors that had them develop the renal disease? You have to check on what happened to them. Were they not are they living in sedentary lifestyle, not exercising? Maybe the choice of food, maybe it's something that you will go back on the past because you have here the present disease. Let's say the disease that you have now is atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis. You will look on the past. How did they develop the arteriosclerosis? Maybe it's all about the food. Maybe it's all about the smoking. Or maybe it depends on what the data is going to tell you from the number of your respondents. Now, that is how we look on the research design using this cross-section, cohort, and case control. Again, it's cross-section. You have here the present data, the disease and exposure. For the cohort, you have the exposure, you're looking forward on what will happen in the future. What disease will they develop? Now, in the case control, you have the disease now, you go back. What was the exposure? Now, let's move on to the research locale. When we talk of locale, it must answer where was the data gathered? Where? Local is the location. So before you go there, you go in the locale, you have to meet some criteria first. You have to describe the sampling design and population composition of the respondents. Okay, are you going to collect it from the doctors? Are you going to collect it from the administrators, nurses, relatives of patients, or patients themselves? Now, when you choose the locale, you look, should I be using randomized or non-randomized? Probability or non-probability? What's the difference between the two, doctor? Randomized is the same as probability. It means that all members of these samples have, the population rather, all members of the population have an equal chance of being a part of the research. No one is left behind. They call it the randomized because everyone in the population, everyone, did not leave any one member behind, not to be included. All of them has to be included in the selection. They call it the randomized. Examples of that, of course, is you will develop a sampling table. You will collect all the names if you're going to use your university. And then let's use doctors in the hospital, assuming that the hospital is King Fahad Hospital. Okay, so in the randomized or probability, you need to get all the names of the doctors. And from those listed names, you will select, they call that the randomized or probability. Okay, however, this is difficult, more difficult, of course, because it requires skill. It's more expensive, of course. It requires more effort. Okay, but the research will be stronger. The result will be more acceptable. Okay. On the other hand, if it is non-randomized, non-probability, these are just simple collection of data from non-randomized people. We can use the accidental. Whoever is available, you get the data from them. Whoever are available in King Fahad, you don't need the list of the names of the doctors. If you know somebody, Then you get the data from them, give the questionnaire. That's already non-randomized. Okay, they call that accidental or convenient, very convenient sampling. Okay, so it's easier, but of course the strength of your research is weaker, like if you're using randomized trial. Doctor, how can I select now using the randomized trial? There is a computation. They call it the random computation. From the list of the names, you will input their names in a computer, and the computer will automatically select from the list of the names to whom are you going to get the data from. You'll be using a questionnaire, you have to send it to those people that was selected by the machine. Okay, and if you're not going to use, you want it manual because you want it more difficult. So sometimes you have to use the lottery method. What are you going to do? You put the names of the doctors in a paper and then you put it in a ball. All the names. You are not supposed to leave any name, not single name behind. Put it in the ball and then randomly select. Select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have already selected the enough number. Then you will get the name from that paper. That paper that you selected randomly is the one who will be getting the data from. Okay, so that's the local. And then we go now on the next step. When you have already designed the composition of respondent, you have to look now on the population, samples, respondents, and participant subjects. Doctor, what's the difference between population, samples, respondents? These cannot be interchanged. They are different from each other. But the basic objective of the research locale is, of course, you have to describe the location. You should be describing the place. Where is the place? What's the setting? What is the background? A little history. But the most important thing in locale is you are answering where. Where? Okay. In research design, which? In local, where? In population and sampling is who. Who? And research instrument, answer what. Now let's move on to the step-by-step selection. There's a difference between population samples and respondents, doctor. Assuming that these are doctors and nurses in a hospital, from different hospitals. You have here King Fahad, King Saud, Uhud Hospital, you have here Medina Cardiac Center, you have King Faisal, King Abdullah, different hospitals. Okay, now from the hospital A, this group of doctors and nurses now what we call the population. From hospital 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have here, from this hospital, you selected him. Another hospital, this one. From hospital, you selected 2. Another 2, another 2. So you drawn it from the population. That is the population. And what will happen from those drawn people or doctors from population, you cannot call them the population. You call them now the samples. Okay, these are now the samples that you have. Okay, now in quantitative research, the more, the merrier. How about doctor? Will all of them know from that sample? You will get one or maybe select it either using probability or non-probability. Now you call them now the respondent. Subject if it is experimental. Participant if they are on a qualitative type of research. Now, you cannot use the word respondent if your research is experimental. Okay, so going back again, from this population of doctors and nurses, you selected, you'll get the samples. And from the sample, you will get, of course, your respondent, your subject, and participants. How about instrument, doctor? When am I going to use? What type of instrument shall I use? Okay, let's start first with the quantitative research. In quantitative research, since you will be getting it based from the number, of course, it's better if you're going to be using survey questionnaire, survey, something that can be expressed. And each of these have a corresponding number. We'll compute the number, you will get the mean, you will get the standard deviation, and then you will look at the relationship of this data gathered from another variable. Sometimes they will check on the survey using good, excellent, good, fair, poor, Likert scale. There should be always, as much as possible, it's more recommendable if you're going to be using Likert scale. Okay, but for experimental, of course, it's another story. But what I'm trying to say here is more on quantifiable. Another source of that data collection maybe because you will be using on the charts, maybe data from the bar graph, or maybe get it from the grades of the student, which can be expressed by numbers. Quantitative. I was telling you, it's quantitative. It's more on numbers. Grades of the student. You tested if your teaching style is effective. Get it from the grades of the student. The grades of the student will answer if there is an improvement using your teaching style. Your teaching style now is the manipulation. So you will get their scores first. You will do the manipulation by teaching them using your new style, and then the post-test. By that, then you will compare the pre-test and the post-test. That will answer you, but still it's number quantitative. Sometimes it's temperature. Okay, temperature, it can be expressed by number. Sometimes it's money, fulus, money. Okay. How about doctor in qualitative? Qualitative is different. I've been telling you there is no number here. So Q method is one. Q method is you will ask the participant to arrange pictures or their responses using a Q style method. This is what they call the Q style method. They will arrange. Now, based from their arrangement, you will interpret. So there's no need for numbers for that. Q method. Okay? Sometimes you have to analyze the words. What you're going to do here is interview. Okay? And then from the words that is spoken, you're going to record the words and then write it down and then look for the significant word. Why did they say or why did they describe that using these words? That is called now word analysis. Again, there is no number in word analysis. You will just analyze the spoken word. Another here is the picture. There's no number here. Give them a paintings, maybe writing, or maybe a symbol. How do they interpret the symbol? Okay. So from their answers, you will draw now your theme. You will develop now your theme from the answers of this few response. Okay. Sometimes for children, these are used because we can gather information also from children because we cannot just gather information from them. Sometimes it's unreliable if we're gonna be using questionnaire. So what are we going to do? We use games. Okay. So on how they responded, their action, their behavior while doing the games is where you will draw now your data. Okay. And sometimes you ask them to draw. That is what we call the doodling. Ask them to draw about their family. They will draw a picture of the house. They will draw the mother is standing beside the father with their children holding hands with each other. And then you will give this picture to a very reliable psychiatrist or psychologist. They will interpret the drawing. Okay, based from their interpretation of the drawing of your participants. That's the time that you have gathered the data. So you will use this. So you know now the difference between using the qualitative and quantitative. In qualitative, it's more on non-numerical data. If it is quantitative, it's more on numerical data. And that is your research instrument. In fact, there are a lot of styles that will depend on the research. We can use also experiences. You want to know the experience of a no Muslim from other religion. How do they accept the new faith in Islam? What are their changes in life? How did they adapt? So you look on their experiences, it cannot be expressed by number. You looking at their experiences. How do they perform? How many days before they learned on how to do the salah? How did they learn about the Quran? So that's their experience. It's not numerical nature, but you will draw from their experiences. Maybe in the hospital, you will look on the experiences of the parents whose children are undergoing chemotherapy. What are their hardships? What are their challenges? What are their experiences? Or maybe look on those COVID cases, those who were admitted in the intensive care unit having mechanical ventilation. You will not look on the patient themselves, but you will look on the nurses. You will gather information from the nurses. Were you scared? They cannot answer. I'm 5 scared. Are you worried? I'm 10 worried. You cannot say that. They have to express it in word. They will say, I'm a little bit scared because I'm exposed to the infection. And I'm not sure because of the problem here is the enemy cannot be seen by the naked eye. So one nurse from another, including the doctors. So you will look at their experiences. You will look at them for maybe 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, so on and so forth. Okay. Again, Abdullah. Oh, mashallah. In choosing the best design, doctor, inshallah, what should I consider? This is what I was telling you a while ago. You have to consider things before you select your design, before you plan. Because planning ahead of time is avoiding for possible failure. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's very important to keep on planning. If you fail to plan, it means you are planning to fail. So the planning should be considering some things. So these are the things that you need to consider. I'm sorry. Okay, these are the things that you have to consider in choosing the best research design. Number one, you have to consider your time and resources. Should it be done in a small period of time? Who are your resources? What are your resources? Do you have enough money? Do you have enough material? When we talk of resources, you have to consider the money, the manpower, the management, you have to consider also the mechanism. Yeah, that's the things that you have to first consider. Is your time enough? You cannot develop a cohort study. You're going to follow up for several years if your time is very limited. For example, the vaccine for the COVID, their time is so limited. They cannot use cohort study. Why? Because their time is very limited. Before the time that they will find out if the vaccine is safe or not, A lot of people have already been affected. You have to look on a different type of research design because it takes time before you will consider that the vaccine is safe or not. It has to undergo a lot of clinical trials. Okay, do you have enough resources? Do you have the laboratory? You have to choose the best design, which is matching, will match, which will correlate, which will favor your time and resources. Number two, if the data doesn't exist, consider whether or not there is a good reason why the data is missing. You've been looking for an answer. You've been looking for an answer. And then you found out that why is it that there's no data about this? Maybe you have to consider there is a good reason why the data cannot be divulged. Also, you have to consider your skill level. You know, you have to be good in interpreting data. In qualitative research, words are you're going to express words. In qualitative data, emotions, observations. If you're not good in that, yeah, you're not supposed to collect. You're not supposed to use that method. You have to consider your ability. Where is your capability? Are you good in experimenting? But some researchers will look on their weaknesses because that is where they're going to work on. If they're good in data collection, they're good in money, but they're weak in other areas. So a very diligent and committed, dedicated researcher will look on their own personal flaws, and then they will try to work on their flaws to answer the things that they need to answer. Okay, but of course you have to consider what is your strength and what are your weaknesses. And then you have to analyze that. Number four, consider funding. When we talk of funding, this is the plus, the money. Do you have enough money? If it is experimental, it's very expensive because if it's true experimental, it should meet the COMAR. Control manipulation, randomization is very, very expensive. Maybe you will be required to do laboratory test with some other personnel. If you don't have enough money, don't enter that kind of design. You have to look for another option. Number five, consider the structure of your questions and variables. Okay, it should be chronologically arranged for some purposes. Maybe you have to randomly shuffle them because some in collecting the data using questionnaires, some respondents will just answer based on okay, they will just keep on checking without really looking on the questions. They'll just look at it and answer without analyzing. Now the veracity, the veracity of the data is not as strong as the other forms of data gathering. Consider number six, consider whether or not you can control the administration of your treatment. This is applicable for experimental researches. Just like what I said, there should be COMAR, control. Can you control it or not, your treatment? Because treatment, on the other hand, is what they call the manipulation. Can you control the manipulation? Okay. Number seven, consider your control over alternative variables. There are different types of variables. Control and alternative variables. You have to consider them. Number eight, consider the number of subjects or cases you either need or have access to. How many cases, how many subjects you need before you can gather the reliable information on the data. So those are the things that you need to consider in choosing the best research design. Okay, Dr. Daniel, before Almira, Elnor, for those who have some questions, you just write down your questions. Then after this discussion, we're gonna go on the question and answer portion. And we'll try to answer your concerns, okay? Dr. Daniel, before I begin, please give me examples to analyze. I'm gonna give you some examples so that you have a drill. Remember, my focus only is on the research design, okay, and planning phase. This is not the entire research itself. If you want entire research, or maybe expound, or maybe make this discussion more comprehensive, you can just contact Dr. Hamad, and I will be discussing another topic for you in the future, inshallah. Okay, but this topic is only for the purpose of educating you on the research design and planning phase. Okay, now let's proceed. Dr. Daniel, before I begin, please give me examples to analyze. I have it in Arabic translation. Bear with me. I am more on English. I'm not really very fluent when it comes to speaking in Arabic yet. In the future, I will learn that. Okay. Now look at the title. I hope everyone can see the title. Perception of workplace violence in the emergency department. Dr. Hamad and I is working on this research now. Look on the, sorry. Perception. I have to remove this one. Yes, thank you. Perception of workplace violence in the emergency department. When we talk of perception, what is this? Is this, what method is this? Is this quali or quanti? Okay, the answer here is this is quanti. Why? If you're going to look data on the highlighted words, data were collected based on a 24-item questionnaire. So this is numerical, expressed in numerical. Basically, it's a questionnaire, then it falls under the quantitative. It's more on number. So there will be descriptive statistics used to describe participants exposed to violence, and there is chi-square and Fisher-Exact test. The chi-square and Fisher-Exact test, if you can see it in your screen, these are now your inferential statistics. So we have here descriptive statistics, and we have here the inferential statistics. If we're going to look at this finished research, completed research, it's a quantitative research. Okay. Another here, violence exposure among healthcare professionals in Saudi public hospital. Exposure among healthcare professionals. So when you collect this data, there should be, you should base it from the most number of people from, in Saudi public hospitals. So if you're going to look, I just highlighted the methods. This exploratory cross-sectional survey employed self-administered questionnaire again. So if it is questionnaire, again, it's quantitative. The questionnaires were distributed 600 physicians and nurses. Look, it recorded them a big number of sample, okay, which is not likely in qualitative. In qualitative, you have 12 participants, that's enough. You can, because you're not basing it from the number. This one is based from the, look, 600 physicians. Now this example is again quantitative research. The examinations of factors relating to the leadership style of nursing leaders in the hospital. So what is the keyword here? Factors relating to the leadership style. Okay, now look, this is again quantitative methodology using cross-sectional survey. There is no past, there is no future. What they are looking now is they are examining the factors to the leadership style of nursing hospitals. No looking backward, no looking forward. Okay, it's a cross-sectional. Educational attainment. I cannot see the of the public health workforce and its implication for workforce development. Now, I'm going to enlarge again the conclusion, the objective. Now, look at this, the levels of educational attainment shall workers as well as the correlates of correlates of attainment. So it's for correlative. Okay. Again, there is a look. Follow my cursor. Descriptive and inferential statistics. Again, this is an example of quantitative research. Okay. Quantitative research. They look on the variable, dependent variable, the age, the region, the supervisory status, race, etc., etc. But they're going to look on the educational attainment. Okay. Factors, again, from the title itself, you see the word factors influencing, again, that will fall under quantitative. Why? T-test is statistics. Again, just like what I was saying, you see the number, you express it. Correlation, and that's your quantitative. Doctor, they keep on giving a lot of examples about quantitative. Okay, this one is cross-sectional. Again, there is a question here that will fall under quantitative. Okay, the relationship between transformational leadership and employee satisfaction. Relationship, that cannot be qualitative. That is quantitative. Okay, why? Because there are 200 surveys mailed out, 83% C number regarding the transformational leadership survey was adopted from multi-factor leadership question MLQ of Minnesota satisfaction. So again, this is quantitative. Job satisfaction of female Saudi nurses. Okay. Again, this study aimed to assess the degree of satisfaction of 233. 233, imagine. If you're going to use qualitative, that will take a lot of time. You are very old before you can go there. Express emotion and satisfaction if you're going to use qualitative. So more appropriate here is quantitative. Okay, so in this research, more than 87% and 92%, both again are expressed in number, saying that they were satisfied with their workplace, because what you're going to look at here is the job satisfaction. Again, it's more reliable if more number of your respondents is included in the research. You cannot base it from the satisfaction of 3 female nurses, only 3 or 4 or 5. That cannot be acceptable. So you need more number before you can conclude that it is satisfactory or non-satisfactory. Quantitative again. Discovering the ethos of serving nursing leadership from the first half of the 3 Nordic countries. An idea, historical research. So if it is historical research, you go back, there is no number there. You go back, it's qualitative research. Okay. Remember the PHEG, phenomenological, historical, ethnographic, and the grounded theory. Look here at this title, use of creative writing to illustrate lived experiences in hemodialysis dependent children with chronic kidney failure. What you're going to look at here is the lived experiences of those dependent children in hemodialysis. What do they have? Chronic kidney failure. Lived experiences again is a qualitative research. What type of qualitative? It's phenomenological research because it's more on experience. Let's look at another. Okay, look at this title. It gives you again the clue right away. Live experiences. No need to look on the deeper aspect of that. By just looking on the title, you can determine if it is quanti or quali. Okay, and then you go on now proceeding to the onward information of the literature. Grounded theory in practice, novice researcher's choice between extortion. Grounded theory is qualitative because you will develop theory based from the previous researches. Okay. Ethnographic study. Oh, look, ethnographic study of whom? Ethno. So there should be group of people, Chinese women. So how do they live their traditional postpartum beliefs and practices? Okay, how is their traditional beliefs and practices different from other race? So that's a qualitative type of research. Okay. So this is example of telenursing on how you will gather data. And of course, you have also here telemedicine. You can get the data. That's another design of the research we're looking forward. Now, especially now it's time of COVID. When you collect data, it's much better if you will do it online. So data collected from using telemedicine, but of course, there should be high respect on the ethical issues because you know the principle of privacy, anonymity, and then the confidentiality of information should always be respected. Ethical issues very high, so you have to consider that also in your design and planning phase. So thank you very much for everyone for bearing with me. I hope you learned something in my discussion and might as well invite me again, inshallah, in the future to be in another topic for the research. Thank you. Assalamu warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel, for this useful session. And as he said, he promised us to give another session in the future. And thank you for all people whom they are attending this workshop. Now it is open for discussion. If anyone have any question, he can ask Dr. Daniel immediately. Now I remove mute for all. Everyone can remove his mute from his mic and ask direct question to Dr. Daniel. الأسئلة مفتوحة. ممكن أي واحد يسأل، يرفع، يشيل الميوت من المايك حقه.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel, for this session. Really, it is very nice one. One question about nowadays we are using internet or link questionnaires. We are doing some questionnaire in link and we distribute it for everybody, but we don't know whom actually respondent for this questionnaire. Is it credible or acceptable, this one? السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel, for this session. And I have one question. Nowadays, we are using link or questionnaire. We are distributing in media for respondent. But actually, we don't know who is doing or is it acceptable for research, for survey method? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Daniel, for the very nice lecture. And thank you for Dr. Hamad Fadallah for hosting this very useful session. My question regarding the longitudinal case studies or time series data. What is the minimum number of data points or years to use so that the results can be reliable as to time series? For example, if I want to measure the impact of, for example, merger or and the success of the company, what is the minimum number of years? What minimum number of years to use? Maybe before the implementation and after the implementation. Can hello? Hello? Are you hearing me? Can you hear me?
Okay. Hello, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you for that question. Hello, Dr. Mohammed. Abdul Karim. Okay, to answer the question of Dr. Mohammed Abdul Karim, there is no specific number of years if we're going to use the correlational type of research in terms of time. What is important here is there is a variable A and variable B. Now, the longer the year, the better. But of course, there is no exact for all types of research. That is a case-to-case basis. Okay? I hope I answered that question. And the question of Dr. Nafisa about the acceptability of data collection using online. In fact, doctor, that is acceptable nowadays because we minimize our exposure with the people around us. Now, that is the only way on how you will collect the data. And it is not only applicable in quantitative research, this can be applicable also in qualitative research. Okay, so that answers your question. Dr. Mohammed? Okay, I guess I was able to answer the question, right? Okay.
ممكن بروف عبد الباسط لو عندك مداخلة.
Go ahead, doctor.
الو السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much, doctor, for
You're
your very
welcome.
nice lecture
Alhamdulillah.
and the very nice presentation. You are
Alhamdulillah.
presenting so slowly, and then very you have a good experience for expressing your work, and that's all the followers are following you. So, and I thank you so much.
You're
And then
welcome. Alhamdulillah.
I will ask the coordinator to ask you again to come back to give another
Oh,
lecture.
Alhamdulillah. Yes, no problem,
Yeah.
doctor. No problem, doctor.
And that should be in the way of, for example, we have to concentrate on the qualitative or quantitative with some real examples, as you showed last time from different articles, and we can go deep inside one of the side of the research to focus on it. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank
You're
you all the
welcome.
attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you also. Thank you.
نشكر الجميع على الحضور، وإلى هنا وإلى لقاء في ورشة أخرى إن شاء الله. نستودعكم الله، وننوه لأنه المحاضرة مسجلة وحتبث إن شاء الله في قناة بروف عبد الباسط بكرة احتمال إن شاء الله للناس اللي واجهتهم مشاكل. إلى هنا، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله تعالى
عليكم
وبركاته.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Finished? Okay. And meeting. Thank you.